At this point of time, Karthik, a lot of people are either asymptomatic or have mild symptoms. They could just have a cold, right? And the
Yeah.
cold can be just a little sniffle, a little cough, and they will be spreading the joy to everybody. So it's this the spectrum of symptoms is really pretty wide. If you are sick or any of your family is sick, the best thing for you to do is just stay at home for a week. I don't think you need to go rush yourself and get PCR swabbed. If after a couple of days you're absolutely fine, I would still stay home for a total, a week and then resume. If my symptoms continue or worsen, then I would go ahead and get a PCR done. No, it's that nightmare scenario, Karthik. Somebody close to you is sinking. There is very little that you can do at home. And there was this little article, that infographic that the government put out, of what they call pruning, right? Basically, you lie down on your stomach. Um, I was looking at it and trying to figure out, hey, this is exactly the time and place where the infrastructure, unfortunately, has failed completely. That the government is putting out an infographic like this. So saturation's going down at home. People are buying oxygen concentrators. Right? I have one at home because I had to use one. If you have an opportunity, you have somebody who is at a high risk, would you buy an oxygen concentrator? If you can get one, it's a worthwhile investment to keep at this point of time. No doubt about it. Beyond giving supplemental oxygen at home, there is very little that you can do except try and find a bed in a hospital. I think anything below 92, which is continuing to fall, Manish, I would try and get him into a hospital and game the system in any way that is even possible to get in there. There is unfortunately very little you can do. So when today when you call somebody and say, "Hey, I have COVID," they give you this whole list of medication, ivermectin, AZ, etc., etc. There's no evidence that any of that really works. So and nevertheless, people give it because, hey, something is better than nothing. It's not going to kill you in the process. Now, once your oxygen starts to fall, or your inflammatory markers are very high, your CT score, which everybody today is an epidemiologist in India and as well as a COVIDologist in India. So the as soon as that CT score goes up, and that's when they say, get them to the hospital, because they think the remdesivir is this magic drug that is going to solve everybody's problem. The answer is no. Remdesivir in multiple trials have found little or no benefit, except in a small trial that, when given very early, it shortens the stay of an ICU, but has no outcome change. So everybody is rushing to the hospital, panic calls, please get me remdesivir. And by God, a drug that costs some 2-3 thousand rupees is 50-60 thousand rupees in the black market. Then there is tocilizumab, and just before this, a relative of mine in Hyderabad is saying the hospital is charging me 5 lakhs for a drug that is a couple of thousand. So the situation, Manish, unfortunately, is will snowball. But I'm sorry for the long answer. To cut it short, if his situation is worsening, try and get him supplemental oxygen at home if you're not able to get a hospital bed. Number two, despite the fact that he's worsening there onwards, you have no option but to get him to the hospital, because that's when high flow oxygen, ICU team, ventilator, etc., are really what is needed. The older you are, the higher your comorbidities, and there's a big list of them, right? And starting from diabetes, which is quite common amongst 1 in 4 of us families have diabetes, puts us into that high risk category. So these are the people who have to take great precaution, right? And I don't stress this lightly. And the problem, Karthik, is not just the oldies. The problem is the younger folks go out party, and you and I have seen quite so much of it in the last couple of months. Get that back, and then infect the oldies back at home. So there is, unfortunately, though vaccination started well in India, it has taken its time to get to the younger population. So the majority number of people who are getting admitted at my hospital today are actually a decade or two younger, and which is very worrying for me. The second, and to me, one that keeps me up at night is the fact that young children are landing up in COVID. And again, it is to me that is the only deeply troubling problem that I foresee. Again, stories like they went to this person's house, came in contact, and all of that is rather clear. But these are the few facts that are very worrying. If you do develop COVID and you have a weaker lung, the chances of you going onto a ventilator are much higher. So these people are definitely at a much higher risk. Proning is when you go onto your stomach. It is basically when you are upright, the lower parts of your lungs are really not ventilating compared to the upper parts. Oxygen goes up, right? So
Understood.
the upper parts of your lung are ventilating well. The lungs are able to take exchange air far better. Now, when you're lying
Understood.
down, what happens is that the lungs which are on the lower side next to your back, they don't work as much. So you want to expand your lungs as much as possible. More the lungs expand, more oxygen it can take in. So that's why we put people on their bellies, and that is what proning actually means. So it is getting the part of the lungs that are not opened up to open up more, so that more surface area is there for
Ah,
oxygen. So a nebulizer is no, it's just taking the air that is already there. It's not increasing the percentage of air that you really need. So that won't be of any help actually. There's no data that says that it helps. But
yeah.
I can tell you that if you have COVID, for me, more than the medication, it was the steam inhalation that caused immense relief
Okay.
from my cough and so on and so forth. So just I was just speaking with Zenol just the other day. So there are mucosal lining in the upper respiratory tract that goes down into the lungs,
Okay.
and each of these has a little filament or microscopic hair called cilia. Now,
Yeah.
the motility of that actually goes down if you are a smoker or the relative humidity drops to below 40%. So, in areas where there's very low relative humidity, especially in winters, you are far more susceptible to COVID than you are when the humidity is higher. So whether that has a correlation with steam inhalation is hard to say. Steam per se, when you take that down, there is no harm done. From the start of symptoms to 10 days, that is your period of infectivity.
Okay.
And after that, you really don't possess enough either viral load And I'm talking about people who recover completely, right, or who are recovering. So I don't suggest anybody to test twice, let alone test before they come out of quarantine or any such thing. Just wait out the period and then resume your life as before. Think of it this way. You have two sets of symptoms. One is systemic symptoms, which is fever, body ache, myalgia, etc. And then respiratory symptoms, that is cough, breathlessness, etc. So if you have cough, breathlessness, you for sure have lung involvement in one way or another. If I only have fever, do I also have lung involvement? The answer is you may have little lung involvement, but not sufficient enough to cause symptoms. Now, how do you differentiate people with, COVID pneumonia? Is that you do a CT scan, and the CT scan has a very peculiar appearance called ground glass appearance, and then the CT you quantify the amount of lungs that are percentage of lung involvement. So that's how you get your CT score, and so you classify COVID as mild, moderate, severe based on that percentage. The idea is moderate COVID and of course severe COVID, far better treated in the hospital, early remdesivir for some people, and that is when you do the CT scan and then take the decision. The labs are making hay where the sun shines. So if you have mild COVID, I would do absolutely nothing. If your symptoms are not improving or they're continuing on day 5, that is when you go ahead and do your blood test to see, hey, how bad is this? Are your viral markers off? Not viral markers, are inflammatory markers off the chart? D dimers are so high. Should I put you in the hospital? Should I put you on anticoagulation? All of these clinical decisions will then be based on day 5 and blood test. Do I do blood test every day or suggest for mild? Zero. Both yes and no. And the problem is the fact that there are false negatives with RT-PCR with this variant. You see, every lab has supposed to test multiple genes, and some of them are only testing one gene. The reagent, and let's call it the reagent, the probe that is used for the RT-PCR does not pick up that variant. And so I'm seeing so many people who show me a negative COVID PCR but have full-blown COVID. Of course, a CT is indicated. A CT is indicated when you need to get to the hospital and when to decide, you need to put him on remdesivir or not, and that is when you should do it. I would not do CTs for younger people with mild symptoms. I would just wait. The best thing you can do is to protect yourself so that you are not you don't transmit to the children, and that is something that all of us must take really seriously. This time around, it is affecting children, and that is something that is sends a shiver down my spine. It's one thing that 70s, 80s, 90s get COVID. It's a entirely different story if young children start to manifest more severely. You can get it the second time around. If both of them have, a few days apart, a week apart, you don't even need to separate them in different rooms. They can be together. Between my wife and I, for instance, my wife showed symptoms first. I was in my latent period, and then when I had full blown symptoms, we just moved in together into the same room. So it is entirely safe to do that. I don't suggest cloth masks at all. especially in the new variants. And this is something that everybody around the world learned, but somehow it escaped Indians, that people still continue to use cloth masks. I guess, as you said, it is better than nothing, but for all of us, the minimum you should double mask, or all of us can get an N95 mask. So I would suggest that when you're going out, please do use an N95 mask. I wear either a surgical mask and I run. So this whole notion about you don't have enough oxygen is actually not very true. And if you are actually physically fitter, like my wife is, she wears an N95 mask and she runs a marathon. So it depends on your level of physical fitness. Please wear a good mask and exercise. That's the one thing that will prevent you from getting severe COVID. Don't use them. Please find there are enough and more fake N95 masks. Please get a 3M supplier to get these for you and for your family. I would wear a mask and go out, Karthik. Right?
Sure.
I wouldn't go and do a restaurant now, if that was the question. Would I go outside for my morning walk if it is allowed and there's no curfew? For sure, I would wear a proper mask and then go out. I'm not going to go to a restaurant. Much worse. Because so I wouldn't travel if it is even though I'm doubly vaccinated, and if I'm allowed to travel, I would still prefer not to if I can. And that is the truth. No. One or two incidences where there have been from minks, I believe, to humans and back, but I'm not worried about getting it from dogs, cats, etc. I can speak from my own personal experience. I had all kinds of really weird symptoms. I had severe backache that needed an MRI to be done. I had intense fatigue. And of course, there are parts of these symptoms were physical, but a major part of them were also psychological. And all of us, I don't want any of you to go through this, but what did help is that I started walking, and I started walking slowly, steadily. I couldn't climb a flight of stairs without being very breathless, and it took me a month to be able to walk a kilometer. But after that, it's been a steady improvement. The So fighting this psychologically is far more important, and a good exercise regimen is pretty much the key to both of these.